Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Lady Leadership Podcast. My name's Sam McIntyre. I'm really excited to have on to the show today Caroline Kennedy. Now, Caroline is an accomplished CEO and global thought leader on business and leadership. She's a sought-after coach to top executives with a really extensive list, and she's just recently written a new book. Welcome, Caroline.
Oh, thank you. It's such an honor and a pleasure to be here, Sam. And I've been listening to some of your interviews, and I feel quite privileged to be here chatting with you because such amazing women you've interviewed.
Yeah, I'm really excited. It's like I'm doing a kind of a leadership PhD by, interviewing so many people and learning so much myself. So yeah, I love it. I really enjoy it. Caroline, so tell me about being a CEO. Tell me about that journey. Let's start there.
The journey. Well, it was a long one and a windy one, I would say, with lots of ups and downs. So my career has spanned over 25 years now, and I lose track of time because I think at one point you go, really, has it been that long? Am I getting older and older? I feel so young, but I started my career in hospitality and tourism and started at the ground roots and worked my way up. Most recently, my role, I was CEO of Australia's largest building franchise, Hotondo Homes, and they have 80 franchises nationally with over 500 employees nationally as well, so quite a large organisation, and an interesting one being in the building industry. And then also prior to that, I was the CEO of Tempo Holidays and Mentors, which was or is a wholesale travel organisation, and I was with that organisation when travel went through the era of where it was being disrupted and people were purchasing online. And so there was a lot of uncertainty around the industry at that time, and the business really needed to adapt and we needed to look at the business model. So I really cut my teeth on some interesting roles and challenges within my career, which I love. I love a challenge.
So tell me about that. You started out, and was it for you? And because this is how it was for me. It's like, what's that next job? What's that next job? Or were you someone who was like, I want to be a CEO?
I knew from a very early age that I wanted to do something for me and for others as well, from an impact perspective. But I wanted to do something that I didn't think was possible for me. And I talk a lot about in my early years, particularly in my teenage years, I grew up in adversity. So if I was to think about as a 16-year-old, did I ever imagine that I would be able to become a CEO of a, multi-million-dollar organization? No. And I always joke about, if you told me at the age of 16 that I would have done that, I would have asked you if you were bonkers or if you'd been smoking some funny stuff, because I came from adversity and it just didn't seem possible at that time. But each step, and I made a commitment to myself back then, where I had a mentor he was a catalyst for change for me, because he said to me, you've been put on this earth. The chances of you actually being here are unique, because if your parents didn't meet, if your grandparents didn't meet, if your ancestor or your bloodline stopped, you wouldn't be on this earth. Do you know how precious it is that you are here? And what are you going to do with this life? What are you going to do that makes a difference? And I remember thinking, he's right. You get one opportunity at this. As far as we're aware, why not work towards doing something that I think is not possible or remarkable from that standpoint? And I just took one step at a time. But what I did do was become a lifelong learner and practitioner. And I was like a sponge. I wanted to learn. I wanted to grow. I wanted to contribute. I wanted to be the best version of myself. But what I would say in my earlier career, for me, that was more about self as opposed to others. And wanting to achieve. So I did go down a path of what I would say was not even leadership, management of driving people to get results and just being driven for success. And then about a decade ago, I started to question whether, probably even more, whether that was leading me to whether I was fulfilled by that. And I started to question management and leadership. Yeah.
Yeah. It sounds like we've had a sort of similar path. I my dad was an aircraft engineer. My mum worked in the office of a school. There wasn't, it was nice if you went to university. You didn't necessarily have to go to university. It was get a job and then, see where that job takes you. And similar, I was like, okay, what's the next opportunity? Similar though, I got to a position and it was about sort of that activity and driving teams. And then it was about, okay, how can I do this better?
Yeah.
How can it's got to be kind of, I remember thinking to myself a long time ago, I don't mind if people don't like me as long as I respect me. And then I was like, no, I actually want respect and for people to like me, because I'm actually, I've got a lot more traits than just kind of driving people to outcomes.
Yeah, me too. I would say though that for me it was, and similarly to you, I thought, and we're role modeled that way as well in the corporate and private sector. But I thought there has to be a better way. There has to be a more human-centric way. And what does that look like? How can I have a greater impact on people? How can I help people become better versions of themselves? And then we all lift. So it was more around, for me, being questioning whether I was operating from a place of self or service. And it was very much in my early career a place of self.
Yeah. I think someone told me that one time as well. And I think that is, it's your ego and you kind of want to climb the corporate ranks, etc. And then once you have a bit, you actually, I think there's a real kind of switch. And it's like, how can I help others? And I discovered the thing I enjoy most was helping women with their leadership. And I discovered, that every time I was in a position of seniority, that I could actually help other women. And particularly, I worked in the technology space, so particularly being able to support and mentor and promote and hire more women into that space. That's where I sort of found I was able to impact.
Yeah, and that's so important because we need those role models and those advocates for women, as you know.
Yeah, exactly. And so when was there a moment where you sort of had that switch, or did it just sort of, evolve over, or I think, with leadership, what you've done to get you where you are is not necessarily what you need to do to take you further. So was there a moment in time or...
Yeah, there was for me, and really that's about looking back at. I remember when I was leaving an organisation, and it was my last day, and we were having a going away, and a young lady came up to me and she said, I hear you're leaving and I wanted to come up and say goodbye, but to let you know how important you've been in my life. And I was quite shocked. And she went on to tell me that one day she said, you were going to the bathroom, you walked past my desk, you looked at me, and she said, I got the fright of my life the way you were looking at me. And you went into the bathroom, but you came back out. And when you came back out, you came up to my desk. And she said, and I was literally scared out of my wits. Why is the CEO standing in front of me? And she said, you asked me to come into your office. And what was interesting thing was, in that moment, what I had witnessed over a short period of time was this gregarious young lady who was really committed to her work, who showed up every day with such enthusiasm, and she brought and was committed to her work continually and engaging with everybody in the office. Now, she didn't report directly to me, but what I witnessed was a shift in her, how she was showing up, and she was withdrawn, she wasn't engaging. So I brought her into my office and I said to her, "Are you okay?" And she burst into tears and she said, "No, I'm not, and I don't know what's wrong with me." And I said, "All right." And I talked, some stuff through with her, and then I said, "Let me call your doctor, and we'll make an appointment for you, and I want you to go and speak to them."
Yeah.
And she let me do that, and we did that, and I offered to drive her there, but she didn't want that, and she went, and I checked in on her that night, and she was off for a few weeks over that period. But what she said to me that day when I was leaving, she said, "You've been so important in my life because nobody recognized." And she said, "I didn't even know what was wrong with me, but you were you pushed that, and you asked me how I was, but you pushed me to go and seek to get some support." And we don't realize how important we are in people's lives and how connected we are. And as humans, how individuals need us. And I think for me, that really was the catalyst for change. If I look back and start to evaluate it, because then I realized that actually, rather than driving people and rather than just being focused on self, how can I help others and lift others up, and as a result set everybody up for success? And then I went on a journey around learning more about what that looks like and how I can be a better leader and a better person too.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, it's so important. It's that human piece, isn't it, really? And it's when you stop talking about people as resources and you start talking about them as individuals.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And that it's not necessarily, it's about kind of bringing people together to get the best outcomes for them and for the organization. Yeah.
Yeah, aligning them to a common goal and empowering them to be accountable to themselves,
Yes.
and that piece around just being aligned to achieving, but they're doing it for themselves, and that empowerment piece, and it's so powerful, really is.
Yeah, I do like that accountability to yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah, and if you're not bringing that, then maybe that's not the right place for you, and you have to then search somewhere else.
Yeah, and I think it's about helping people to be accountable. I know in the work that I do, I hold leaders accountable,
Yeah.
and then I help them and support them to holding their teams accountable to themselves, because people, once you can connect them to that accountability piece, they just go off and do it themselves because they're aligned to it.
Yeah, yeah, you're not needing to check on them and drive them and, tell them what to do.
Yeah.
They've got some skin in the game, so to speak.
Yeah, it's what I call influence, or one part of influence anyway.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
tell me about the book then. So the book's around, the skills, and tell me if I've got this right. The skills that you need, sort of it's called Lead Beyond 2030. It's the skills that you're going to need in the next decade and beyond, essentially.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it evaluates what I call old school management, that traditional management, and the skills required there, and then the evolution of leadership and the future, and what the variables are in terms of skills that are in demand. And I know it's moving very quickly, and you as you're in the tech space, you would know a lot about this. But when we look at AI, the evolution of AI and how that's been how it's been introduced into business, and how we look at data and the information we can get from data, and how that is impacting then the skills that are needed, because obviously skills become redundant, and roles become redundant. But what I see is that the advances in technology and the move towards what we call the fifth industrial revolution is around how we can harness those human skills more, and then utilize the technology to be able to help us advance, and that piece around remaining relevant. And it's evaluating also to the research out there, the research that I've done. So what we've concluded is that the 9 skills for the future are, they first look at leading self, leading business, leading others, and then leading business. So leading self is around that embracing emotional intelligence, tapping into self-awareness, building authority. And then if we look at leading others, it's about leveraging human behavior, getting really clear on human behavior, why individuals do what they do, and particularly around, we can somewhat be one-dimensional historically in the way we look at leadership and how we lead. So one-dimensional, and we take one approach, whereas the future requires, particularly around human behavior, that we become multi-dimensional, that we look at individuals and what they need from us. So meeting people where they're at and taking a multi-dimensional approach based on that. And then we look at influence, empowering high-performing teams, tapping into humans and helping to empower them, holding them accountable. And then when we look at leading business, that's around the actively problem solving, cultivating businesses and cultures that are critical thinking, and we're cultivating that as a skill, and then nurturing that adaptability quotient. And what's quite interesting, Sam, is that I would say for 5+ years, I've been talking about the importance of adaptability. And certainly I know you'd be quite familiar with that, given you're in that tech space. But there are a lot of leaders who really dismissed it. And then when COVID happened, everybody had to adapt. And for me, that's that continuing to remain relevant, whether it be business or self, looking at what the future holds and ensuring that you're adapting to what's required for the future too.
Yeah, it's sort of that Kodak story, isn't it, really?
Yeah.
And
they're in there. They're in the book.
Oh, are they? Good.
Yeah, them and BlackBerry.
Pardon? Oh, and the BlackBerry. Yeah, that's it. I mean, that one's incredible as well. We all had a BlackBerry, didn't we? Yeah. And we were all getting our pictures developed at Target. It really is that looking forward. And I agree with you entirely. The skills that I've got today, are they the skills that I need for that next evolution, or are they the skills that I need for that change? And I think, that's important, is that, like you said around yourself, that lifelong learning, like what, if you're in a role, and I think sometimes, I see this in senior leadership, what are they learning, or how are they learning, or how are they getting out of their chairs and finding out about what's going on?
Yeah. I agree 100%. And we tend to, what I see is do the same things over and over again, but expect a different result. Yes. And it's really just challenging that status quo and thinking, how can we do things better? What does that look like? And for me, I was always that leader that did that. It came quite naturally to me because I'm very curious. And so I would think about, okay, like in the travel industry, when that was being disrupted, We went out and did lots of analysis, got data points, understood what was changing, what did we need to do. We are very much a traditional business model whereby the travel agent would come and buy from us, and we'd sell product, let's say for Europe. If a person wanted to go travel through, let's say, Greece hotels, we'd arrange the entire thing. But what would happen is we'd go off to suppliers and they'd come back. It'd take a week for us to put an itinerary together, and the pace of how the consumer was purchasing just moved so much quicker than that, and we needed to adapt, and we needed to look at how we leverage technology to do that, XML connections to get instant availability, instant confirmations, looking at our online platform, how we communicated both with travel agents and consumers, and just to evolve that business model to ensure that the business remained relevant. And it was in a time where a lot of organizations in travel, particularly those traditional wholesale models, they weren't surviving. They were closing doors all the time.
Yeah. Yeah, because it really did shift from that, go to the travel agent because I want to go traveling, to jump online, do some research yourself and book some places, basically.
Yeah.
If you had that desire. And you wanted to do it yourself quickly. And I think part of that's that ability, I think, as a leader, to put yourself in the work as well, and actually kind of understand at quite a low level where you need to, where there's issues, what is actually in the trenches, what's going on.
Yeah. And I think what I see too is as leaders, individuals can be quite internal. So they're focusing on the internal elements of their business, as opposed to let's look at what's happening in market. What do we see? What are the stories we're getting from the data? What are those data points? What is the research that we're doing? How do we, even adopt technology across industry, across geographical, and how can we leverage that within our business to remain relevant? And I think there is such a let's say 80-20 rule of 80% focus on internal and not enough focused on the external on a regular basis. And I think they're both really important.
I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've sat through a meeting talking about what the budgets are going to be, the sales budget's going to be in 5 years' time for a product.
Yeah.
Who the hell knows? And, particularly with COVID, but I've spent little time talking about what are our customers actually saying about us here and now today, and what are the problems. I think if you started your business meeting with what are the problems the customers are saying, it'd be a very different focus in terms of, instead of guessing how many lipsticks we might sell in 5 years' time.
Yeah. And I love problems. For me, problems are opportunities. It's like the obstacle is the way.
Yes.
So even internally, what are our major problems, and how do we solve them? And that is organic innovation, really. It's just about problem solving continually, internally, externally, and to ensure that we are, improving and remaining relevant. To your point.
I think so. But I think as well, you sort of maybe put a bunch of salespeople in front of the customer who are going to tell the internal what they want to hear, and as long as they're kind of meeting their sales numbers, everything's all good. And you commission them on those sales numbers as well. I've always found that a bit perplexing.
Yeah.
We don't commission other people on delivery of tasks. So
I just think that in any organization, that critical thinking, that problem solving, that adaptability is so critical, and we're seeing a shift towards it.
Yeah, which is good. And so what made you decide you wanted to write the book?
Because I think for me, I was somewhat frustrated by that traditional leadership and the inefficiencies with that traditional leadership, and and the speed at which it was evolving, because it has a great impact on people, and not always in a positive sense, the traditional. And I thought, how can I help leaders and organizations become better versions of themselves so that they have greater impact, they have greater influence, and then they have, greater outcomes and income as well. But particularly because I think as a community, socially, we're all crying out for more of that human centric, and that's evident even more so now. So if you look at, for instance, a couple of months ago with Eddie Maguire, when he fronted up to the media when they had done the investigations into the racism within the Collingwood Football Club, and in that moment, he tried to spin something as opposed to just being human about it and saying, look, we made a mistake. I've investigated it. It's not acceptable anymore. We take ownership for it. We're moving forward. We have empathy towards the individuals that have experienced that in our organisation, and it's not good enough. But instead, and people are...
What did he say? I can't quite remember what he said, actually. What did he... Yeah, but he got quite a strong retaliation, I believe.
Yeah, he said something along the lines of, and don't quote me word for word, but something along the lines of, the essence of it was, this is a proud day for us, because they had done the investigation. But I think what that taught us is that the community no longer wants people spinning things. They don't want the master of spin. They want honesty. They want, integrity. They just want you to act as if you're human. And they're demanding that. And even if you look at, with the Prime Minister recently, with how he handled the Christine Holgate situation, I mean, that was appalling. When you think about that from a human perspective, and even just the process, and I mean, they've been criticised quite regularly about their lack of empathy, and continually, and people are saying it's not good enough anymore. That organisations do need to operate with integrity and with ethics, but from a human perspective, and just do the right thing. And it's not that hard. And I think for me, I saw the benefits of when I was able to shift my thinking from being about self to being about service and being human. Now, that doesn't mean we give people everything that they want. I mean, from my perspective, I always think as a leader, it's very much about giving people what they need, not necessarily what they want. And it's that tough empathy piece, and how we can have a greater impact in each other's lives as a result and benefit. I mean, the research is clear that where leaders have greater emotional intelligence and are more human-centric, it has a bottom line positive impact. And so for me, I was really hungry to see that change, and thought, how can I have a greater impact with that? And hence why I wrote the book.
Yeah, no, I like that. And it's, I think, as a leader, it's also about setting your own boundaries as well, isn't it? So you'd recommend start with yourself, start with your own leadership, start with, what is the type of leader that you'd like to be, start with that emotional intelligence piece. Yeah, work with others, and how can you help them? How can you help them on their journeys, and then the organisation as well.
Yeah, and then a lot of the work that I do is really about help supporting executives to see where their gaps are related to this. So, for instance, challenging them to think differently, how to tap into individuals, and it's very specific to the executive that I'm working with. So there's no one size fits all cookie cutter approach. It is very much about what I see from the strengths as the leader and then the opportunities for development. And I won't be specific in saying you need to do X, Y, and Z, because if we look at the neuroscience behind how the brain works, for instance, if I set up a computer and you set up a computer, Sam, and we buy them on the same day, we set them up, and a year later I come and say, Sam, can I use your computer? And in that moment, I get on there and you filed all your folders differently to what I would have done, etc. So I'm not going to be able to just jump on there like I would my own computer and start, finding everything. And the brains are the same. Our brains are all based on our experiences. They're all based on our knowledge, how we perceive things, etc. And so for me, I don't tell people. I help them to conclude themselves the areas where I see that they have opportunity for development, and I help them on that pathway of discovery, and it's very effective because they conclude and then they start to implement these techniques and these skills and these strategies in the business, and then they see the effects of that and the impacts of that. So it's very, very powerful.
Awesome, Caroline. I love it. It's so good. Because, you can't change anyone else. People have got to have their own, epiphany, so to speak.
Yeah.
Yep. How can people get in touch with you? What's the best way?
My website, so carolinekennedy.com.au, and the book is there. Information on me is there, and they can contact me through the website as well.
Beautiful. All right. Well, I recommend everyone grab a copy of that, have a look at the skills that you're going to need for the next decade. And, it's about doing the work, isn't it? Really?
It is. You have to want to do the work.
You have to want to do the work. That's exactly right. Thank you, Caroline. Really loved having you on the show.
Oh, thanks for having me, Sam. It was thoroughly enjoyable. I really appreciate your time.
Cheers.